On nights like this, when the world outside your window softens into stillness and even the streets seem to hold their breath, I invite you to settle into a gentler pace. Let the quiet wrap around you like a warm blanket, and let your thoughts drift the way mist drifts over an empty field. Tonight, I'll guide you through one of the most enduring mysteries ever written, a tale woven with fog-thick moors, whispered legends, and a shadow that has lingered for generations. But don't worry, here the story unfolds softly. Each step will be slow, steady, and comforting, like the rhythm of a calm heartbeat. So breathe in, breathe out, and let us begin The Hound of the Baskervilles. In the soft gloom of a London morning, the rooms of Baker Street sat in their habitual quiet. The fireplace murmured with a low crackle, its warmth spreading gently across the room, turning every drifting shadow into something calm and familiar. Dr. Watson stood near the window, feeling the faint chill from the street seep through the glass. He had always found early mornings in this place strangely peaceful, almost meditative, as though time itself slowed down out of respect for Sherlock Holmes's relentless mind. Holmes sat in his armchair, his long, slender fingers resting together beneath his chin. Not in tension, nor in boredom, only in that contemplative patience he carried so naturally. Before them, on the table, lay an old walking stick, polished wood, slightly worn, the imprint of years resting along its handle. A visiting card had accompanied it, left earlier by a man they had missed. Holmes studied the stick with gentle focus, the way someone might gaze at an old photograph. "A country doctor," he murmured in that low, velvety tone that made even his deductions sound like quiet poetry. "Experienced, well-trusted, walks frequently to see his patients, and generous in character." Watson watched him with a familiar mix of admiration and fond amusement. Holmes always claimed his work was purely logical, yet there was an artistry to it. Even his silences carried texture. Moments later, the door opened, and the very owner of the cane entered. Dr. James Mortimer, tall and thin, with a kind but worried face. His presence disturbed none of the room's tranquility. Instead, he seemed almost relieved to step into a place where order and clarity lived. He clenched his hands slightly nervously as he greeted them. "I fear I bring a strange matter," he said softly. Holmes gestured for him to sit, voice steady as a still lake. "Please, tell us everything." Mortimer laid a faded manuscript on the table, an old family document, its pages carrying the smell of age and the faint roughness of parchment. As Watson leaned closer, the doctor explained, "It is the legend of the Baskerville family." And so he began to read. His voice wavered only slightly, yet the tale was enough to stir the air in the room. Hugo Baskerville, a cruel nobleman from centuries past, a knight of pursuit, a young maiden who fled in fear. A demonic hound said to have appeared on the moor, and the death of Hugo, found lifeless on the ground while a monstrous creature, part shadow, part nightmare, stood over him. A curse, the manuscript implied, laid upon all Baskervilles. Holmes did not move through the reading, only watched, silent and thoughtful. Watson felt a chill not from fear, but from the solemnity of hearing such an ancient story spoken aloud. Dr. Mortimer then told them the event that brought him here. The sudden death of Sir Charles Baskerville, the latest head of the family, found near the entrance to the moor, his face contorted not in violence but in terror. And near the body, though no one dared believe it, Mortimer claimed he had seen footprints. Footprints of a gigantic hound. The fire popped softly, scattering a few sparks upward. Even they seemed to crackle quietly, respectfully. Holmes finally spoke, and the air... Mortimer swallowed. Sir Henry Baskerville, the last of the line. He arrives in London today. Holmes nodded slowly. And you fear for him? The doctor closed his eyes. I fear the moor, and the shadows, and the possibility that what killed Sir Charles was not a mere legend. Watson's heartbeat quickened, not in alarm, but in that quiet anticipation he felt whenever a new case unfolded. Yet Holmes remained calm, his voice like soft embers. Dr. Mortimer, rest assured, we will look after Sir Henry. Outside, a carriage rolled past Baker Street, the sound softened by distance. London seemed to breathe gently. Holmes turned to Watson with a faint, almost warm smile. Come, Watson, our quiet morning appears to be over. But in truth their calm morning had only deepened, settling into something quieter still, an unfolding mystery that would take them far from the warm walls of Baker Street into the vast loneliness of the moor. When Sir Henry arrived the next day, he carried the air of a man sturdy enough for country life yet unaccustomed to fear. The light in the hotel lobby fell across his features gently, warming the edges of his determined expression. But beneath his confidence lay a thread thin, almost invisible, of unease. I received a letter, he said, offering it to Holmes. A warning. Anonymous. Holmes examined the note, letters clipped from newspapers, arranged into a message urging Sir Henry to stay away from the moor. The craftsmanship was oddly delicate, as though the sender meant the threat but not the malice. There's also another matter, Sir Henry added with a troubled chuckle. Someone has stolen one of my boots. Holmes raised an eyebrow, though softly, like a breeze lifting a curtain. A curious theft indeed. Piece by piece the puzzle grew, strange shadows in the street, a man following them, whispers of danger that moved as quietly as morning fog across an empty field. Holmes weighed everything with that steady, unhurried grace. Then, with a calm certainty, he made a decision that surprised Watson. You, Watson, will accompany Sir Henry to Baskerville Hall. Watson blinked. Alone? For now, Holmes replied, tone warm but firm. Your presence will protect him, and the moor will reveal truths I cannot see from here. Holmes rested a hand lightly on Watson's shoulder. I trust you. The words settled deeply into Watson's chest, like a quiet flame lasting through the night. The train toward Devonshire cut steadily through the countryside, its rhythm slow and soothing. Fields drifted by in great sweeps of green, then softened into rolling hills, then flattened again into stretches of misty expanse. Watson watched the scenery blur gently, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him, not heavy but grounding, like a cloak resting on his shoulders. Sir Henry stared out the opposite window, thoughtful yet calm. By the time they reached the moor, the evening light had turned golden and quiet. Dartmoor stretched out before them wide, lonely, almost dreamlike. Soft wind carried the scent of damp grass and faraway peat. The land felt ancient, peaceful in its emptiness, as though every breath of air had been drifting here for centuries. Yet there was something else too, something faint, a little hollow, like the echo of a memory half forgotten. Baskerville Hall rose from the land in muted stone, weathered and noble. Its windows glimmered faintly with the first hints of evening lamp glow. Inside, the hall greeted them with a gentle hush. Footsteps softened on the old rugs. Shadows rested quietly in the corners. The servants welcomed Sir Henry with practiced warmth, though Watson noticed a lingering gloom beneath their politeness. That night, Watson stood by his bedroom window, looking out over the vast moor. The wind moved steadily through the grasses, turning them into slow, swaying waves. He felt no terror, only a solemn stillness, like standing on the edge of a sea made not of water, but earth and sky. And then, faintly, drifting across the land, a sound. Low, distant, almost impossible to name. Not quite a cry, not quite a howl, something in between. It rose for a moment, touched the edges of the night, then faded into silence. Watson held his breath. He did not shiver, but the moor did. The moor, in its vast nocturnal stillness, had a way of pressing gently against the windows of Baskerville Hall, an almost sentient presence, not hostile, yet deeply ancient. Dr. Watson awoke before dawn, his breath steady, his thoughts calm but attentive. The faint memory of that distant cry or howl, or whatever it had been, lingered quietly in the back of his mind. Not in fear, only as a shadow carried along by the wind. He lit the candle beside his bed, watching the flame take its time to bloom into being. Its glow warmed the wooden edges of the nightstand, and the tiny crackles of its wick echoed faintly in the still room. After dressing, he stepped into the hall, where the air held the soft scent of old stone and morning chill. Sir Henry was already awake, standing near a window that overlooked the moor. Light crept slowly over the horizon, not in brilliance but in a muted grey-blue hush. He turned as Watson approached. "I slept well," Sir Henry said with a faint smile, though Watson noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. "But something about this place gets into one's bones, peaceful yet unsettling." Watson nodded. "The moor is old. It carries its own kind of silence." Neither mentioned the sound from the night before, neither needed to. It lay unspoken, suspended between them like a soft question. They made their way downstairs, where Mr. Barrymore, the butler, greeted them with his quiet, steady voice. His eyes, though polite, seemed troubled, like someone carrying the weight of an unshared worry. He moved with precision, yet there was something in his manner Watson couldn't quite place. Not deceit, more like sorrow. Breakfast unfolded gently, the way mornings do in large echoing houses. The clink of cups, the rustle of newspaper pages, the occasional distant creak in the walls. Outside, the moor stretched endlessly, its mist drifting in slow, contemplative currents. Sir Henry broke the quiet. "Watson, I think I'll take a walk after breakfast, get a feel for the land. Would you join me?" "Of course." Barrymore cleared his throat softly. "I must advise caution, Sir Henry. The moor can be treacherous." Sir Henry smiled in reassurance, but Watson sensed something more to the warning, a kind of earnest fear that Barrymore tried, unsuccessfully, to mask. When they stepped outside, the cold greeted them gently rather than harshly. Grass swayed in long, unhurried motions, and the damp air carried the earthy scent of peat. Birds circled overhead in slow, looping patterns, their wings catching the pale morning light. The path leading away from Baskerville Hall wound like a quiet thought through the land. Watson walked beside Sir Henry, taking in the landscape's solemn beauty. The moor was not frightening, it was simply vast, so vast that a man could feel himself shrink and stretch at the same time, becoming both smaller and more aware of the world surrounding him. They soon spotted a figure approaching from the distance, moving with an easy stride. It was Mr. Stapleton, a naturalist who lived nearby. He greeted them with genial enthusiasm, though even his cheer seemed to soften under the humbling presence of the moor. "A strange, wonderful place, isn't it?" he said. "Full of peculiar insects, rare plants, and of course the Grimpen Mire. Quite dangerous, that one." His voice floated lightly across the air, unaffected by the gravity of his words. He spoke not to frighten, but to inform. "And you, Sir Henry," Stapleton continued, "must find this all rather different from your life in Canada." "Very," Sir Henry chuckled, "but fascinating." Stapleton gestured toward a distant area where the ground sank slightly, almost imperceptibly. "The mire lies somewhere there, looks harmless from a distance, but the mud can swallow a man whole. Best avoid it." Watson followed Stapleton's pointing hand. The land did look deceptively gentle, almost serene. A moment later a soft rustle broke the quiet, and Miss Stapleton approached, light-footed, poised, and carrying herself with an air of subdued elegance. She greeted them politely, her voice low, almost whisper-like in the open air. Her eyes, however, flickered with something deeper, something Watson noticed the moment she stepped close to Sir Henry, a mixture of caution and fear. When Stapleton stepped a few paces away to examine a plant, she leaned in towards Sir Henry, her expression urgent. "Go back," she whispered. "Go back to London. While there's still time." Sir Henry blinked, startled. "But why?" She shook her head, glancing quickly toward her brother. "I cannot explain, but you must leave. This place is not safe for you. Please, listen." And just as suddenly she stepped back when Stapleton returned, her composure restoring itself like a veil falling into place. Watson observed the entire exchange silently, a quiet tension settling in his chest, not from fear, but from the weight of an unspoken truth lingering between those hurried words. That evening Baskerville Hall felt heavier than before, not oppressive, just fuller, as if the walls themselves listened. Watson walked the corridors after Sir Henry retired, his steps soft against the old stone. Lamps dimmed the hallways with warm pools of amber, leaving gentle shadows drifting beside him. Near midnight he heard it, a faint sound, like a muffled sob, not loud, not sharp, almost drowned beneath the thickness of the corridor air. Watson followed it to a door, the butler's quarters. Inside, a shape moved past the keyhole's thin line of light. "Mr. Barrymore." He held something in his hands, and from the soft glimmer, Watson recognized it as a candle. He wasn't heading to bed, he was moving quietly toward a window at the far end of the hall. Watson, careful not to disturb him, trailed from a distance. Barrymore paused at the window overlooking the moor. His shoulders rose and fell softly, a heavy sigh escaping him. Then he lifted the candle as though signaling its flame a tiny wavering star in the dark room. A A moment later, far across the moor, a faint pinpoint of light flickered in response. Watson's breath caught, a signal, a deliberate exchange. Barrymore extinguished the candle almost immediately and slipped quietly back to his room. Watson remained in the corridor, the silence around him deepening. Why would the butler signal to someone on the moor? Who waited out there in the dark? And what purpose could such secrecy serve? Watson did not confront Barrymore. Not yet. The truth often ripened more fully when given time to reveal itself. He returned to his room, but the image of those distant lights stayed with him. And again that night, carried on a low wind, he heard the same strange cry echo across the moor. Only this time it sounded closer, more distinct, more like a howl. The following days unfolded with a slow, steady rhythm. Watson spent much of his time walking the grounds, observing, listening. His duty was to guard Sir Henry, but also to observe everything he could, for Holmes would expect nothing less when he returned. He met the neighbours, spoke with local farmers, and took note of anyone who cast even the faintest shadow of suspicion. There was the stern Mr. Frankland, eager to complain about anyone and everything, the quiet shepherds who kept their distance. The wandering figure of the convict who had escaped from Princetown prison, Selden, Barrymore's kin, hiding somewhere across the moor. Yet of all these threads, the one that tugged most firmly at Watson's thoughts was Miss Stapleton. Whenever they crossed paths, she carried the air of someone haunted by an unspoken fear. Her gaze lingered too long on Sir Henry. Her movements grew tense whenever Stapleton approached, as though she navigated her brother's presence like a field of hidden traps. Sir Henry, meanwhile, found himself increasingly drawn to her, captivated not only by her quiet beauty, but by the mystery she carried with her. He walked with Watson one afternoon, confessing in a voice softened by sincerity. "There's something about her, something gentle but wounded. I want to understand it." Watson listened with calm compassion. "Then be cautious," he advised, keeping his tone warm but steady. "This place hides more than it reveals." Sir Henry sighed, gazing across the moor. Holmes would have known exactly what to do. Watson smiled faintly. "Holmes trusted you enough to bring you here. That means something." Late one evening, as twilight deepened into its softer violet hush, Watson set out alone. The moor beckoned him, not with fear, but with a quiet promise of revelation. He carried a walking stick and wore a heavy coat, though the wind had settled into a mild whisper. The land stretched before him in gentle undulations. The sky shifted slowly from lavender to a darkening blue. Each sound, his footsteps, the distant cry of a lone bird, the rustle of grass, felt magnified by the open space. Then, unexpectedly, he saw it, a figure, standing on a rise not far away, outlined by the faint glow of the retreating sun. Tall, motionless, watching. Watson slowed, breath steady, pulse calm but alert. The figure didn't move, not toward him, not away. It simply observed. Watson raised his hand in greeting. The figure disappeared. Not abruptly, just stepped behind an outcrop of rocks, swallowed quietly by the land. Watson hurried forward, but when he reached the spot, nothing, only the sweeping moor, empty and quiet as ever. But someone was out here. Someone who watched from afar, someone who didn't want to be found. And Watson, with steady resolve, realized this mystery was far greater than legends or fearful whispers. That night, in the warm glow of a small desk lamp, Watson sat down to write a letter to Holmes. The scratch of his pen moved slowly across the page, each stroke measured and thoughtful. He detailed Barrymore's midnight signalling, Miss Stapleton's urgent warning, the stranger roaming the moor, the cries in the night, the creeping sense of a pattern just beyond comprehension. He ended with a quiet admission, one he rarely allowed himself to feel. "I wish you were here, Holmes. Not because I fear for myself, but because the moor keeps its secrets in silences too deep for one man to uncover alone." Watson folded the letter gently and sealed it. Outside, the wind lulled the hall into a deep quiet, and somewhere beyond its stone walls the moor breathed slowly, like a vast resting creature. The next morning brought a soft rain, light as mist, beading along the windows. Watson found Barrymore and his wife unusually tense, whispering in corners, exchanging glances heavy with concern. And when Watson finally confronted Barrymore, calmly, gently, the truth emerged in slow, painful pieces. The lights on the moor were signals to Selden, the convict. Barrymore was helping him survive, sneaking him food. He did it not out of malice, but out of compassion, because Selden was his wife's brother. The truth didn't frighten Watson, it saddened him, and it hinted at deeper threads twisting beneath the surface of life at Baskerville Hall. As the rain tapered into a quiet drizzle, Watson stood at the window overlooking the moor once more. Clouds drifted low, heavy yet beautiful, their movements soft and deliberate. The case had grown thicker, darker, but also clearer in its complexity. And Watson, ever steady, felt himself standing at the threshold of a turning point. The moor was shifting, watching, waiting, and soon he sensed something would emerge from its depths, something that would cast the first true shadow on the path toward the truth. The wind shifted that night, carrying with it a deeper cold, a kind that clung quietly to the stone walls of Baskerville Hall. I remember standing near the long window of my room, watching the moor fade into its usual misty blackness. Somewhere in that distance lived stories no man had fully unravelled, and dangers we barely understood. And yet, that was the world Sherlock Holmes had sent me into, trusting that careful observation could protect both Sir Henry and the truth. It was near midnight when I finally sat at my desk to record the events of the day, but before pen could meet paper, a sound drifted through the corridor, soft, almost apologetic. A footstep, a whisper, or merely the hall settling into the darkness. Baskerville Hall had a way of making every sound feel deliberate. I opened my door just a little, enough to look down the long passageway. A single candle burned on the wall, the air was still, and then, faint but clear, came another sound. The soft creak of a door closing somewhere near the western wing. Someone else was awake. I wrapped my robe around me and stepped into the corridor. The cold stone beneath my feet was a sharp reminder that this was no dream. As I moved toward the sound, I noticed a strip of dim light spilling from beneath a door, one I had seen earlier that day, belonging to one of the unused rooms of the manor. I paused, listening. Inside, something shifted, a quiet scrape like wood against stone. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. But on the window ledge sat a candle, burning low, its flame trembling as if someone had placed it there only a moment before. And on the floor, half hidden beneath a draped cloth, was something that gleamed faintly in the light. A boot. Sir Henry's missing boot. I picked it up, surprised by the weight of it, and even more disturbed by the realization that someone in the house had taken it only to return it again. But for what purpose? A sudden gust blew in from the open window, snuffing the candle and pushing the door shut behind me. Darkness folded in at once, thick and absolute, and then a howl rose across the moor. Long, mournful, echoing deep and ancient. A sound no human throat could produce. Even alone in that cold room, I felt the roots of fear reach toward my spine. I clutched the boot and stepped back into the corridor where the hall's light steadied my breath. When morning came, the moor outside glimmered with a thin frost. Sir Henry joined me for breakfast, though fatigue lined his eyes. Before I could speak, he set down his fork and said quietly, "You heard it too, didn't you, Watson?" There was no reason to lie. I did, I admitted, and it was not the cry of any hound I've ever known. Sir Henry nodded, staring into his plate as though searching for courage. I keep trying to convince myself that it must be wind or some trick of the moor, but every night I hear it, my uncle's fate returns to me. I cannot help but wonder. Do you? Do you believe the legend? I answered honestly. I believe in danger, but I don't believe in curses. He smiled faintly. Holmes would be proud of you. Before we could continue, Barrymore entered the room. His face was paler than usual, and his hands shook slightly as he laid out the Morning Post. I watched him carefully. The man carried secrets as tightly as he carried his trays, but today something about him was even more unsettled. Sir Henry noticed it too. "Barrymore," he asked, "did you sleep well?" The butler gave a stiff bow. "Very well, sir." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. When he left the room, Sir Henry leaned toward me. "Watson, could it be that he's the one roaming the corridors at night?" "I intend to find out," I told him. And so, that evening, when the house settled into its usual nighttime silence, I positioned myself in the shadow of the stairwell where I could watch the western wing without being seen. Minutes turned to hours, and the chill pressed deeper into my bones. Then, just past 1 o'clock, a figure emerged down the corridor, tall, thin, moving with anxious, purposeful steps. Barrymore. He carried a candle in one hand and something long and wrapped beneath his arm. I followed at a distance, careful not to let my footsteps echo. He reached the same unused room from the night before, slipped inside and closed the door. I waited, counting each slow breath. When enough time passed, I crept to the door and pressed my ear to the wood. A voice, soft, strained, not Barrymore's. A woman. I pushed inside. Barrymore jumped in fright. Standing beside him was Mrs. Barrymore, her eyes red with tears, and in Barrymore's hand was not a weapon, but a bundle of food and clothing. "Dr. Watson," he gasped. "Sir, please, you must not misunderstand." "Then explain," I said sternly. Mrs. Barrymore stepped forward. "It is my brother, sir," she whispered. "He escaped from the prison on the moor. We have been trying to keep him alive. He is starving, hunted, desperate." I froze. The escaped convict, the one the police warned us about, was hiding somewhere near Baskerville Hall, and the Barrymores were aiding him. Barrymore lowered his head. "He was once a good man, sir. A foolish mistake led him to prison, and since then everything has gone wrong. We only wish to give him a chance." I looked between the two of them, feeling the weight of their desperation. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because," Mrs. Barrymore whispered, trembling, "Sir Charles meant everything to us. We could not bear to bring more shame to the Hall." Their grief was genuine, their fear real. I sighed. "You should have told us sooner, but I understand." Barrymore nodded gratefully, though a shadow still hung over his features. It was then I heard it again, a sound drifting through the window, weak, ragged, borne on the wind, a cry, then a howl. Not the mournful, distant call I had heard before, but something sharper, angry, wild. Barrymore's face drained of colour. "Oh no," he whispered. "He must still be out there." "Your brother?" I asked. He nodded silently. I grabbed my coat. "Then we must find him." Sir Henry, awakened by the commotion, joined us moments later. Without hesitation he agreed. And so, with lanterns and cold breath streaming into the night, we stepped out onto the moor. The mist rolled low and heavy. The ground crunched beneath our boots as we pushed deeper into the open stretch of land. The moor at night felt alive, watchful, its silence broken only by our footsteps and the occasional cry of a night bird. Then the mist thinned, revealing a silhouette moving across a rocky ridge. A man, thin, wild-haired, running. Barrymore called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Selden, stop! It's us!" But the man only ran faster, fear driving him forward. Sir Henry and I chased after him, lanterns swinging. The wind cut across the ridge, carrying with it a familiar sound. A deep, rumbling growl from somewhere in the darkness. Sir Henry slowed. "Watson, did you hear that?" Before I could answer, a terrifying howl tore through the night, closer than ever, so close it seemed to rise from the ground beneath our feet. Selden screamed. We reached the ridge too late. His body lay motionless on the rocks below. Sir Henry staggered back in horror. "My God!" But my eyes were not on the fallen man. They were on the moor itself, on the shifting mist, on something enormous moving behind it. A shape, a silhouette, four-legged, massive, watching us. Then it vanished. The lantern shook in my hand. For the first time I wondered if even Sherlock Holmes could explain the creature that stalked the Baskerville line. And the next morning, when I wrote to him detailing every terrible moment, I could not help but end my letter with one trembling question. "Holmes, what hunts these moors?" Morning came with a pale grey sky stretching quietly over the moor, as if the land itself wished to hide the memory of the night before. Even inside Baskerville Hall the air felt different, muted, heavy, as though the walls had sensed the tragedy and were holding their breath. Selden's body had been brought back in respectful silence, and the Barrymores wept in a way that needed no witnesses. Sir Henry spoke softly to them, offering what comfort he could, but grief has its own language, one that even kindness cannot fully soothe. I withdrew to the drawing room, where the fire had been lit early to chase away the damp cold creeping through the hall. I sat near its warmth with my notes spread across my lap, trying to piece together the events that had unfolded. A creature on the moor. A howl that chilled the blood. A shape too large for any earthly dog. Yet Holmes always insisted that no mystery was ever solved by fear. Still, last night's vision followed me like a shadow. As I prepared to write to Holmes once more, a knock sounded at the door. When I looked up, Mrs. Barrymore stood before me, her hands wringing a handkerchief. "Dr. Watson," she whispered, voice trembling. May I speak with you?" I gestured for her to sit, but she remained where she was, as if rooted by the weight of what she carried. "My brother," she began, "he was not himself these past months. Prison changed him, fear changed him, but last night, just before everything happened, he told us something we did not dare repeat." She glanced toward the hallway before continuing. "He said he often heard something on the moor at night, Not just once, many times, a creature he could never see clearly, but whose presence he felt. He said it was no natural beast. Her eyes lifted to mine, shimmering with equal parts dread and sorrow. Dr. Watson, whatever killed him, it was not the fall. A shiver passed through me. What makes you say that? She hesitated, then answered. His face, sir, the terror upon it. I have never seen such fear on a living man, nor on one who has passed. She turned away, unable to continue, and left the room with quiet footsteps. I stared into the fire, hearing her words echo with the crackling logs. Not the fall, not chance, but fear. And something out on the moor that inspired it. Later that afternoon I walked beyond the manor to clear my thoughts. The moor stretched endlessly under the washed-out sky, its muted colours blending into a landscape of gentle, sorrowful beauty. The wind brushed the tall grasses with a soft whisper, and far off the tors rose like ancient monuments. I followed a narrow path toward one of them, a jagged hill crowned with scattered stone. As I climbed, the air grew colder, but the view from the top was worth the chill. The moor unfurled in rolling waves, vast and quiet, hiding its secrets beneath a blanket of mist. Something glinted near the rocks below. I descended carefully and found a small metal object half buried in the moss. When I lifted it, I felt my heartbeat quicken, a note folded tightly. With a handwriting I recognized instantly. Sherlock Holmes. A sudden breeze rustled the paper as I opened it. Holmes's signature clarity appeared in every sharp stroke. Watson, trust no one. I am closer than you think. For a moment all sound seemed to fade from the moor. Only the wind remained, brushing softly against my coat. Holmes, here, watching the case unfold in silence? Observing without revealing himself, as only he could. Before I could process it fully, another detail caught my eye, footprints leading away from the rocks, faint but unmistakable. They trailed down the slope, disappearing into the darker folds of the moor. Someone had been watching me, and not long ago. My pulse steadied slowly. I folded the note and slipped it securely into my pocket. The air seemed to sharpen around me, carrying a subtle sense of being observed. When I returned to Baskerville Hall, Sir Henry greeted me in the study. He was pale, exhausted from the night before, but his spirit had not broken. "I've made a decision, Watson," he said. "Tomorrow I'll accept the invitation to dine with Mr. Stapleton and his sister. A change of setting might do us good." I hesitated. The moor is dangerous, especially at night. He offered a faint smile. "Then you shall accompany me, old friend." Before I could respond, the wind outside rose suddenly, rattling the window panes. For a moment the distant moor seemed to hum with something ancient and restless. Sir Henry looked toward the glass. "There is something out there, Watson, something we must face sooner or later." I nodded, but even as I tried to reassure him, my hand tightened around the folded note in my pocket. Holmes was near, watching, waiting. Which meant the truth was close too, and somewhere out on the moor, beneath the shifting mist and the cold night sky, the Hound, whatever it truly was, moved with its own purpose. A purpose tied to the Baskerville name, a purpose we had yet to understand. The hours after sunset settled softly over the moor, wrapping the land in a dim, velvety shadow that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Watson found himself walking alone beneath the deepening sky, his lamp held steadily at his side, its weak glow trembling with each distant tremor of wind. The vast sweep of Dartmoor appeared almost unreal at this hour, its heather and reed bending like dark waves in a sea without foam. He had left the house earlier than planned, spurred by a restless feeling he could not quite name, something between caution and curiosity, something born from Holmes's quiet instruction and the strange tension that had been gathering ever since they'd arrived. And though he walked with purpose, he did so gently, each step softened by the long grass underfoot. The world was hushed, as if it held its breath. Holmes had not reappeared openly, yet Watson sensed him somewhere out here, moving like a shadow moving between the edges of sight, keeping watch as he always did. The detective's subtle presence, even unseen, was a comfort in this wide, whispering landscape. Still, Watson could not help feeling the weight of the moor pressing in around him, the dim hills curving like silhouettes of sleeping beasts beneath a sky where faint stars flickered behind thin layers of drifting cloud. Ahead, the faintest glimmer. And so we leave the moor behind for tonight, its wind settling once more over the heather, its long shadows folding gently into the quiet of the hills. The footsteps of Holmes and Watson fade into the distance, softened by the darkness and wrapped in the calm that only the deepest hours of night can bring. Whatever truths lie waiting in the fog will greet them soon enough. But for now, the moor rests, and so should we. Thank you for sharing this quiet journey with me, for walking the lonely paths of Dartmoor, for listening to the hush of its wild expanse, and for lingering with the gentle mystery that always seems to move just beyond the light. Stories like this one breathe differently after sunset. They settle into the room, into the air, and perhaps into us as well, like flickering embers slowly dimming in the hearth. If the calm of this tale brought you even a moment of stillness, I'm grateful. And should sleep find you now, softly, quietly, may it wrap around you like the very mist that drifted across the moor tonight. Rest well, my friend. And until our next story, good night.